Yo, what's going on, guys? Back here with another banger video. And in today's video, we're going to be recounting everything that I've accomplished in terms of Beastly Bundles throughout 2024. Because, tomorrow's New Year's Eve, so I got to wrap it up. And I'd like to recount all the achievements I've gotten in terms of Beastly Bundles for this year. So before I get into the recap, make sure to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications so you never miss one of my future uploads. By the way, my big announcement is coming out either tomorrow or New Year's Day. And also, the Holy vs. Demon deck battle is not going to come out for a while. I already filmed it, but I have to do like a voiceover and editing and whatnot, and that's probably going to take a long time. Just letting y'all know. But yeah, with all that out of the way, let's get right into the recap. To start off 2024, I made the Gen 6 review, but back then I called them set reviews, and this was kind of the start of my official Beastly Bundles collection, because before that, I had 3 videos where I was like showcasing them, but I didn't have specific sets or gens or whatnot, and this was my first actual like set/gen review. I called it set 1, but it was really Gen 6. And this one, I had some Gonya cards, and I started the Galaxy Dragon archetype that I still haven't finished. Well, it's now the Cosmic archetype. The sports cards, that's also not finished yet. My first ever Evo cards were in this gen. I'm going to call it a gen, not a set. And this was kind of when I started consistently adding abilities to the beasts, because before I would just not give them any abilities. Oh, this was also the start of traits, and obviously the poison trait was the first ever trait to be introduced. And as you can see back then, I did not make very many spells. It's basically 95% beasts. When now, it's definitely still more beasts than spells, but I think now it's probably like 70-30, but back then it was way, way off. Now on to Gen 7. This was the introduction of counter spells, which was game-changing. And I just realized I started counter spells at the beginning of 2024, and I don't think I even have 20 of them. I genuinely think I might have less than 20 counter spells, because I thought I made counter spells like maybe at the beginning of the summer, so I had like an excuse for it, but no, I made them at the beginning of 2024. So why have I been slacking on them so much? But yeah, not much happened here. I made a couple Evos. As you can see, more consistent abilities. I think I had abilities on every single one of these. I improved the art from the past gen, and it was overall pretty good. Now on to Gen 8, and I remember this gen because so far, all of the sets I had made were of about 30 cards each, and this had 45 cards, and the special thing about this one was they were all Bs. It was only B grades in this entire gen. Because the reason I did that, because at the time, there was like the amount of Bs compared to the amount of Cs and As was minuscule, and I genuinely think this was the last time that I had more A's than B grades. So yeah, it was definitely needed, and I'm very thankful I did this, because if I didn't, then I would kind of be in debt of B grades for a long time. And this had a good roster, but a couple of them were a little bit, how do I say it, filler. Like, some of them I didn't even put abilities on, and I was just trying to do random art. Like, it wasn't that good, but I had to do it. It was necessary. On to Gen 9, and this gen specifically just has a bunch of Evo cards. Like, I mass-produced, I think, 13 Evo cards in this one, and I made a top-tier card in Blubby Bara. And I also started making small combos between, like, not that many cards, maybe like 2 or 3 cards, but this is where I started making small combos. Now we're going into Gen 10. Nothing that special happened in here, except I made a couple of fusion cards, and I made a couple more combos. Not that crazy. Gen 11 kind of set the standard for where the game is today, because this is when I actually started putting thumbnails on my videos. I started making 54 card gens. I started making counterparts. I added another trait, burn damage. and I actually started to kind of create archetypes. I created the Christmas archetype, the Genie archetype, and I just remade a bunch of old cards that were just buns. So this gen kind of set the stage and gave me a little layout for where the game is today. Gen 12, most known for introducing the third trait into the game, which was bleed damage. As you can see, I also made a bunch of loop spell for certain types, and I also made a box where I put all my decks. Yeah, this is when I started actually making storage for my beastly bundles. And like the last gen, I started to create small archetypes that I would build from in the future. Now, branching off of Gen 11, the first ever somewhat fledged archetype was the Pepper archetype, and I think I made 9 cards for this, so obviously it was not done, but this is the first ever archetype, I think. Like, when you combine cards and they have each other's names, and there's more than just 3 or 4 of them, I think the Pepper were the first archetype, and they set the stage for all the archetypes that are in the game today. So, Gens 12 through 14 were kind of all similar in the sense that they were only archetypes. I basically only made archetype cards. If they didn't have an archetype, I didn't make them. I had sushi cards, candle cards, bone cards, atomic cards, and I also added to old archetypes like the sports archetype, narwhal archetype, and the elemental stone archetype. So, yeah, this was definitely needed, and it kind of, like, I would say a lot of these cards that I created in these 3 gens, I haven't really done much with the archetypes, except for a few exceptions, like the bone archetype I've worked on recently. But for the most part, these have been the newest versions of their archetype. Now, Gen 15 is where I really started to up the quality. As you can see, I started making game boards, and I kind of clickbaited y'all with this because I said it was going to be a last set review, but it definitely wasn't, because clearly I'm right here doing a full 2024 recap. But yeah, this was the end of the first half of the year, and after this, I made a first half recap. So that's kind of crazy looking back on it, that I'm doing a full recap after I did the half-year recap. Yeah, but this gen was kind of just more the same, adding to archetypes and whatnot. The thing that made this gen different from the past 3 was that it was just more clean. As I said before, I upped the quality, and I think all the cards just look better in general. I think that's just objective. In between Gen 15 and 16, I made 3 deck reviews: Father's Day deck, Mother's Day deck, and then the Rat Pack deck, which was for my sister, because she's a rat. And then I also obviously made the first half of 2024 recap, and then I had Gen 16, which kind of went along with Gen 17, because I made the cards at the same time, and I also laminated them at the same time, and I just chose whether or not to put it in Gen 16 or 17. And I think in Gen 16, I focused on a lot of Evos. Like, there was a ton of Evos, the most since Gen 9. So there was just a crap ton of Evos. I started the Dessert archetype. I added another counterpart with the Altar Band, which those cards I think by far are my favorite counterpart cards. They just came out so clean. This gen also had the 4th trait introduced, Thorns, which definitely is the most forgotten and, in my opinion, probably the worst currently. As I said before, Gen 17 I made at the same time as Gen 16, so as you can see, the art is pretty similar as some of the Gen 16 cards, and in this gen, I made the Pirate archetype. I started the infamous Ice archetype. It's not really infamous. I don't know why I would even call it that. This gen also held the first ever Beta S grade evolution with Drekador, and this gen also had a lot of burn support, fire support. On to Gen 18. In this gen, I was mostly adding on to the archetypes I made in the last couple of gens, with more pirate support and more ice support, along with creating the masked archetype and also renewing the cosmic archetype, which I kind of left in the past with Galaxy Dragon in Gen 6. With Gen 19, I wrapped up some crucial archetypes with the Lemon archetype and the Honey archetype. I also focused on starting and adding a little bit to archetypes. I kind of made a Fish archetype, added to the Pirate archetype, created an Art archetype, added to the Recycling, added to the Masked, created a Soul archetype, and also made a Marshmallow Mini archetype. Started a pseudo water archetype, and in this gen you'll notice a lot of these cards were based off of Bloons TD. I'll admit it, but they are drippy. Now from Gen 18 and then went through Gen 19 and then stopping at Gen 20, I made the mod chip mechanic and beastly bundles, which has been forgotten. I don't think I made a new mod chip in at least 3 gens. And the thought was there, but I think it's just too much. It's just too complicated. I guess you could use it in game, but that's just like you're just a nerd if you use this in game. So I kind of want to forget about this because it was just OD work to come up with new abilities and limitations and whatnot on these. But yeah, the art was good. I low-key liked how they looked, but it was just too complex, I think, for an already difficult game to understand. And then I also made a bunch of deck reviews, Ice deck review, Pirate deck review, Honey and Lemon deck review. Those two started in like Gen 1 or 2, finally finished them. Now onto the big 2-0 Gen 20. I also clickbaited and said this would be the last gen, but obviously it wasn't because we made 2 more after that, and we're going to continue making them in 2025. Spoiler alert. But yeah, this gen honestly is up there with, I would say, my top 3. Like, there was a lot of good cards in this gen, and it took so long because after Gen 19, I was in a slump. I was not trying to make any more cards for a while, but I pushed myself through it, and I did, and this came out to be one of the best gens in my opinion. Following up strong, we have the Soul deck review, which is probably my favorite deck so far. The cards are drippy, they have cool abilities. There's really nothing much more you need. Now comes along Gen 21, and my biggest regret is messing up this game board. That little wrinkle on the left side of it, it bugs me to this day. And I've been trying to re-laminate it with the 5mm, but it doesn't work. The gen itself was decent. I was really just setting up a few decks and archetypes with the Halloween deck. I added to the Art archetype, added to the Soul archetype. I started officially the Holy and Demon decks, and I also created the 5th and final trait, the Stun trait. I might make more in the future. I feel like this is good where it is. Really, Stun could either be Freeze or Stun, but I feel like Stun is just more usable because Freeze, you can only really use that for Ice Beast, and Stun, you can use it for pretty much any type. So when I'm referring to a card getting frozen, it's just them not being able to attack or use abilities. That's really just what being frozen is. Where being stunned is basically the same thing, except it always has an exact amount of turns that you're stunned for, and then also there's a cooldown on it, which some of the freezing abilities and effects don't have that, but all of the stuns do. Actually, there might be some stuns in the future that don't have any cooldown. I mean, wait, you would have to have cooldown, right? No, technically if you attack multiple times per turn, you wouldn't need a cooldown. Okay, I'm going on a rant right now. I need to get back on topic. On to the latest gen, Gen 22. I will admit, this gen was pretty low effort. Like, some of the cards, like the Torkoal and Torkold cards, looked good in my opinion, but the other ones, like the first card you saw, the Light Tire remake, it did not look that good. But I have an excuse for that one. I had a full art behind it for Dark Archangel. Archangel. I don't know why I call it Archangel. But I erased it and put Light Tire over it. So that's my excuse for that one. But overall, it just didn't look good. Like right here, Warpalisk, he just looks buns. His art did not come out the way I intended it. And I was just too lazy because I wanted to just get this out so I could make the Christmas deck on time and post the Holy and Demon decks before 2025. But some positives, I did make a new archetype, the Scrap archetype, which incorporates magnets, which is moving the column that cards are in, and also setting traps, so counters and whatnot. And from here on, I basically just focused on the last 3 videos that I've produced since this one, which were the Christmas deck, Holy deck, and Demon deck. And I think those cards came out good. I think the Christmas was the worst out of the 3. Also, this is kind of where I got self-aware and I started to realize how much writing I'm putting on these new cards. Like, every one of these has at least, 5 lines of writing. Am I going OD on them? Like, even some of the weak cards, I'm giving multiple lines of writing. Like, it's getting to be a problem. And I'm running out of abilities and spells to make. So, please help me out in the comments. Give me ideas. But yeah, this is how much I've done so far. Let me know if you want to see a collection, because I have a huge cereal box of over 1,000 cards. Currently, I have 1,111 cards. Perfect number going into 2025. And my big announcement video will either be coming out tomorrow or New Year's Day, so stay tuned for that. I hope y'all enjoyed this 2024 recap. Make sure to like, subscribe, and turn notifications on so you don't miss any of my New Year's videos.